The real story of Hazrat Adam, the first prophet of Allah. Do you like to listen to stories? Would you like to go on a journey with me to learn about the most historic personality of all time? The first man on earth whom Allah the Almighty spoke with. Can you guess who he was? Yes, I am indeed speaking of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, the first prophet of Allah the Almighty. His story begins with the creation of the universe itself. Do you know how our universe came into existence? Allah the Almighty tells us in the Holy Qur'an that in the very beginning there was a Big Bang, which was the beginning of all creation. With time, that mass started to expand and various galaxies started to form. Among one such galaxy, there was a tiny planet which was now called Earth. On it, after billions of years, life began. Allah the Almighty created the entire universe and everything in it in various stages, taking millions of years, if not more. When Allah the Almighty had created everything and the world had been in existence for billions of years, towards the end of all creation, He created human beings. These early human beings were similar to plants in the beginning. They did not move, talk, or eat. Rather, they received their food from the earth in the same way that plants do. Then, through the process of evolution, they progressed over time. They became lifelike and started to walk like animals. At this stage, they could move, eat, drink, and sleep. But even now, they could not speak or think like we do. So Allah the Almighty progressed them further, and now they started to think and speak with one another. Soon they realized that there are dangerous animals all around them that can hurt them anytime. So, in order to protect themselves from being eaten up, they started to live in caves. When they were in caves, they were protected against bad weather as well as the attacks from dangerous animals like lions, wolves, and even snakes. Allah the Almighty has told us in the Holy Qur'an that these people were called Jan. These were the earliest cavemen we know of. Humans were not as developed yet because they did not know how to cook or build homes, and they did not have any clothes on them. Time went by, and slowly but surely, these earliest human beings evolved again, and were now ready to live together by forming small villages in valleys and open grounds, away from the caves. They were also now physically and mentally ready to speak with Allah the Almighty. From among such people, there was one man who was chosen by Allah the Almighty to lead them. People called him Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, and this is his story. We do not know who the parents of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam were, but we do know that Hazrat Adam alayhi salam was born as a twin on a Friday just before the sunset. Allah the Almighty has not told us about Hazrat Adam alayhi salam's childhood other than the fact that he lived in a cave like all the other people. He belonged to an area in present-day Iraq, which was part of the land of ancient Mesopotamia. With the passage of time, Hazrat Adam alayhi salam grew stronger and became an intelligent man. Shortly thereafter, Allah the Almighty provided him with a life partner who became his wife. Her name was Hazrat Havva alayhi salam, and she also used to live in a cave just like Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. One day, out of nowhere, Hazrat Adam alayhi salam heard a voice call out to him. Can you imagine how he must have felt hearing a voice out of nowhere? He must have been scared, but the voice calmed him as it was the voice of Allah the Almighty. Allah the Almighty spoke with Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and started teaching him the Arabic language himself. Once Hazrat Adam alayhi salam learned Arabic, Allah the Almighty made him the first prophet of God. When Allah the Almighty had made Hazrat Adam alayhi salam his prophet, He commanded the angels and the rest of His creation to perform sajda, which meant that they must obey Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and help him in establishing the very first community of believers in Allah the Almighty on earth. But there was one person called Iblis who became jealous of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and refused to obey him. Iblis said to Allah the Almighty, "How can I, who is created from fire, obey Adam, who is created from dust?" What Iblis meant was that he had an angry personality and could not accept the authority of someone like Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, who was a humble man of God. Iblis continued, "O Allah, I cannot obey Adam because I am better than him." At this answer from Iblis, Allah the Almighty said to him, "O Iblis, now that you have disobeyed me, you have lost all honor." Iblis then became hopeless and said that he will try to destroy Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and his followers from following Allah the Almighty. This way Iblis announced that he was an enemy of Allah the Almighty and His Prophet Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. Allah the Almighty then called out to Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and said to him, "O Adam, from this day you and your wife and those who believe in you should go and live in a place which I have prepared for you." Allah the Almighty then continued and stated, "You will all stay together like a community or one big family, and it will be like a little paradise on earth." Allah the Almighty also told Hazrat Adam alayhi salam that he and his followers were to help one another with food and water so that no one goes to sleep hungry or remain thirsty. In those days, hunting was not a part of human life, and so people could not benefit from animal skins. So, in order to cover themselves, Allah the Almighty told Hazrat Adam alayhi salam that he and his followers should make clothes out of straw and leaves. This way, no one will remain naked, and they would have modesty and respect for one another. You see, wearing clothes and covering your body has been a sign of modesty as well as respect for one another for thousands of years. This is why in our religion we are taught to wear modest clothes that do not reveal our body to others. Allah the Almighty also told Hazrat Adam alayhi salam to make small huts made up of straw mats for hundreds of people, where each person could live with his own family. These huts were to be built close to one another with a fence around their homes so that no wild animal could come to attack them. Allah the Almighty also gave the law to Hazrat Adam alayhi salam that when people would commit any crimes, they would be punished accordingly. This way, everyone was going to be held responsible for their actions. You must be wondering what these people were going to eat in order to survive. In the garden, there were fruits of all different kinds. Allah the Almighty revealed to Hazrat Adam alayhi salam which plants to avoid as they were poisonous and which plants to eat as a source of food or nourishment. With all of this knowledge, Allah the Almighty also warned Hazrat Adam alayhi salam against the attacks of Iblis and his family, saying, "Do not approach this tree, for if you do, you would become of the wrongdoers." This forbidden tree was no physical tree. Rather, it meant a specific family of people that were known as the firebrand. Firebrand is someone who is always ready to pick a fight with others and does not like peace. Allah the Almighty told Hazrat Adam alayhi salam not to befriend Iblis or his family members, nor let any of them enter this garden where Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, his wife, and other believers were to live. Allah the Almighty told Hazrat Adam alayhi salam that Iblis would try to kill you and your friends by deceiving you. With this message, Allah the Almighty sent Hazrat Adam alayhi salam back to his people. After listening to the voice of Allah the Almighty and receiving so much guidance, Hazrat Adam alayhi salam came back to his people and said to them that Allah, who created everything, has spoken to me and has chosen me as his prophet. He has taught me many things and has given me a message to share with all of you. Can you imagine how those people would have reacted when Hazrat Adam alayhi salam said that there is one God, the creator of everything, and that he spoke with me? These people had not heard of God before. So when they heard Hazrat Adam alayhi salam speak of him, they must have been shocked. Allah the Almighty tells us in the Holy Qur'an that some people believed in Hazrat Adam alayhi salam because they knew that Hazrat Adam alayhi salam does not lie, while others rejected the message he brought. You must remember, these people used to live in caves out of fear of being eaten up by animals. And here is Hazrat Adam alayhi salam telling them to leave these caves, their safe haven, to go with him and live under the blue skies. This would have greatly scared some of those people. So, you know what they did? They started to oppose Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. They thought that if they can kill Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, then nobody will leave this place, nor will anyone ever listen to him.